Guys, this one starts crazy fast. Aliens came to Earth in minutes, but they picked the worst planet.
The invasion lasted 4 minutes before the screaming started. Commander Varesh stood inside the observation chamber of the warship Judgment of Silence, watching the blue planet rotate beneath him with growing irritation instead of triumph. Earth looked smaller than intelligence reports suggested. Smaller. Weaker. Primitive clouds drifted over dark oceans while clusters of yellow city lights blinked quietly across the night side of the world. No orbital defense grid blocked their descent. No military fleet challenged their arrival. No unified planetary shield activated around the atmosphere. For a species that had somehow reached interstellar communication range, humanity looked embarrassingly vulnerable. That alone should have warned him. Landing forces deployed, an officer reported calmly. Surface resistance remains scattered and unorganized. Varesh nodded once without taking his eyes off the planet. The operation was already proceeding exactly as predicted. Shock invasion. Orbital dominance. Decapitation strikes against communication centers. Psychological collapse within 12 hours. Formal surrender inside 3 planetary cycles. The Empire had repeated the pattern across 14 civilizations. It had never failed. Below, the first invasion pods tore through Earth's clouds like falling meteors, blazing red against the darkness while terrified civilians across entire continents stared upward in confusion. Emergency broadcasts exploded across human networks almost instantly. Some governments called it an attack. Others insisted it was a meteor event. One nation accidentally interrupted its own emergency warning with a sports advertisement before the transmission vanished entirely. The bridge crew laughed quietly. Humans did not even understand they were being invaded yet. Then the feed from Landing Group 7 disappeared. Varesh frowned slightly. Clarify. The communications officer adjusted his console. Signal loss, Commander. Likely atmospheric interference. That explanation lasted 19 seconds. Then Landing Group 12 vanished. Then 5. Then 3. One after another, entire strike teams began disappearing from tactical displays without distress calls or combat alerts. Their biosigns did not register as dead. Their equipment did not transmit damage reports. The units simply vanished after touchdown as though Earth itself had swallowed them whole. The laughter on the bridge stopped. Varesh stepped closer to the tactical projection hovering above the command floor. Red invasion markers blinked steadily across multiple continents, but entire sections were now going dark faster than command systems could compensate. That is impossible, he said quietly. The Empire's ground forces were genetically engineered for hostile environments. Their armor adapted dynamically to climate and terrain. Their tactical implants linked every soldier directly into orbital support systems. Primitive resistance fighters should not have been capable of eliminating entire squads silently. Another alert flashed. This time a transmission came through. Not from a military channel. Civilian. The image appeared distorted at first by rain and static before stabilizing enough to reveal darkness, trees, and terrified breathing somewhere beyond the camera. One of the alien soldiers from Landing Group 7 stumbled into view wearing damaged combat armor streaked with mud. Varesh felt confusion before concern. The soldier's breathing sounded erratic. Behind him, thunder rolled across the night while rain hammered against leaves overhead. There are humans everywhere, the soldier whispered. A loud crack echoed somewhere in the forest. The soldier turned sharply toward the sound, weapon raised. We cannot track them properly. The environment keeps interfering with thermal mapping. Visibility is unstable. Local terrain changes The transmission cut violently. For a moment the bridge remained silent except for the low hum of the warship. Then a second transmission appeared from another landing zone. Snow this time. White mountains. Fierce winds. A damaged invasion craft burning sideways against frozen rocks while distant human figures moved through the blizzard carrying outdated projectile weapons. Not energy rifles. Not plasma systems. Bullets. One alien officer stared in disbelief. Why are they still using kinetic firearms? Nobody answered because another feed suddenly appeared beside it. A flooded coastal city. Then a desert. Then an underground subway tunnel crowded with armed civilians. Different terrain. Different tactics. Different human responses. No consistency. No pattern. The invasion model began fracturing in real time. Varesh watched reports flood across the tactical display faster now. Human resistance cells were appearing in places too quickly to be coordinated. Local infrastructure failures blocked invasion routes almost immediately after deployment. Bridges collapsed seconds before alien convoys crossed them. Communication towers overloaded without warning. Entire roads vanished beneath controlled landslides before armored units arrived. And strangest of all, humans kept attacking after impossible casualties. Not retreating. Not surrendering. Fighting harder. A sharp warning tone suddenly cut across the bridge. An orbital surveillance station above the northern hemisphere had just gone dark. Then another. Varesh slowly looked back toward Earth. For the first time since arriving, the planet no longer looked weak. It looked awake.
Bro, the aliens find out Earth was never weak. It was waiting.
And somewhere beneath the storms, oceans, forests, mountains, cities, deserts, and shadows of Earth, humanity had already started hunting the invaders. By the 6th hour of the invasion, the Empire stopped calling Earth a low-risk world. By the 9th, several commanders privately started calling it cursed. Commander Varesh did not believe in curses. He believed in systems, probabilities, military patterns, and historical repetition. Civilizations rose, resisted briefly, and collapsed once orbital superiority was established. It had happened too many times to question anymore. The Empire's conquest model was not simply military doctrine. It was mathematics refined over centuries of expansion. Shock the population. Break communication. Destroy coordination. Offer survival through surrender. Every species eventually chose fear over sacrifice. Every species except this one. Varesh stood inside the tactical chamber while Earth rotated slowly across a massive holographic sphere suspended in the darkness before him. Hundreds of red invasion markers spread across the continents, yet instead of stabilizing, the front lines were becoming more chaotic every hour. Human resistance did not behave logically. Whenever alien forces adapted to one region, an entirely different style of resistance appeared somewhere else. Forests became ambush zones. Cities became traps. Power grids became weapons. Even weather itself seemed hostile. A communications officer looked visibly unsettled while reading the newest reports. Landing Group 14 lost contact in the southern jungles. Atmospheric saturation disabled aerial scans again. Another officer immediately followed. Urban assault columns in Sector East report civilians using maintenance tunnels to move undetected between combat zones. A third voice interrupted before the second even finished. Mountain detachments requesting evacuation. Human snipers operating beyond visual range during snow conditions. Varesh listened silently. The details themselves were not what disturbed him. It was the inconsistency. Empires prepared for organized resistance. Governments. Infrastructure. But Earth behaved less like one civilization and more like thousands of separate survival systems reacting independently at the same time. No central strategy should have held together under orbital assault. And yet somehow the resistance kept accelerating. He enlarged the holographic projection toward North America. Entire regions appeared dark due to coordinated infrastructure shutdowns. Human networks intentionally disconnected themselves before the Empire could seize them fully. Rail systems shut down minutes before invasions reached them. Civilian satellites burned themselves out through overload commands. Even local navigation systems became unreliable because humans kept destroying their own digital markers faster than the invaders could exploit them. They are crippling their own infrastructure, one strategist said in disbelief. No, Varesh replied quietly. They are denying us dependence. The room fell silent. That answer disturbed even him, because most civilizations protected their infrastructure during invasions. Cities represented stability. Communication represented order. But humans abandoned convenience almost immediately once survival became the priority. The Empire studied technological capability for centuries. Humanity was teaching them they should have studied psychology instead. Another transmission appeared unexpectedly across the tactical chamber. This one came from Earth's surface. Civilian again. A middle-aged human woman stood inside what looked like a small grocery store illuminated only by emergency lights. Shelves behind her sat half-empty while distant explosions echoed somewhere outside. She looked exhausted, frightened, and strangely calm all at once. "We know you're watching," she said directly into the camera. Varesh expected panic. Begging. Instead, the woman reached beneath the counter and calmly loaded ammunition into an old kinetic rifle while continuing to speak. "You think this planet belongs to governments and armies." She looked briefly toward the sounds outside before facing the camera again. "You still don't understand where you landed." The feed ended. One officer laughed nervously. Primitive intimidation tactics. Varesh did not respond, because something about her tone bothered him deeply. Not confidence. Familiarity. As though humanity had prepared emotionally for catastrophe long before the invasion began. Another report interrupted his thoughts. "Commander, civilian resistance spreading faster than projected. Multiple non-combat population centers now engaging occupation units voluntarily." Voluntarily? Yes, Commander. Human civilians are actively entering combat zones despite evacuation orders. That made no strategic sense. Most species protected civilian populations at all costs during conquest scenarios. Terror reduced resistance efficiency. Fear weakened morale. The Empire relied on that reaction because fear simplified occupation. Humans reacted differently. Fear appeared to multiply them. Varesh suddenly remembered something buried inside the original Earth assessment files. One behavioral analyst had once described humanity as a species psychologically adapted for prolonged instability. At the time, the Empire ignored the observation because it sounded absurd. Now he wondered if it had been the single most important warning in the entire report. A new tactical projection appeared over Europe. Alien forces had successfully occupied a major transportation sector 2 hours earlier. According to all projections, resistance activity there should have collapsed by now. Instead, the opposite happened. Human civilians trapped inside the occupied zone began coordinating through handwritten messages because digital systems were compromised. Delivery drivers used abandoned service roads to transport supplies beneath aerial scans. Firefighters converted emergency tunnels into hidden movement corridors. Construction workers deliberately weakened buildings before occupation forces entered them. Every ordinary system on Earth was becoming part of the war. Varesh felt something unfamiliar beginning to grow beneath his frustration. Respect. Not respect. Concern. Because the Empire's conquest model depended on predictability, and humanity seemed biologically incapable of staying predictable for longer than a few minutes. Then another strange report arrived. Several captured humans from different regions had finally been interrogated separately. Yet all of them repeated variations of the same phrase. "You should have left when you still had orbit."
That line right there, yeah. Humans already knew this war was not normal.
Varesh stared at the transcript for a long moment. One sentence. Repeated by civilians, soldiers, engineers, farmers, and students from completely different parts of the planet. No coordinated script. No organized propaganda. Just certainty. A junior officer attempted to dismiss it. Emotional defiance behavior. But Varesh noticed something else. None of the captured humans asked whether Earth would survive. Not one. As though survival itself was already assumed. The realization settled heavily into the room. The Empire invaded Earth expecting fear. Instead, it had interrupted something ancient, stubborn, and dangerously awake inside the human species. And somewhere far below the clouds, oceans, mountains, and burning cities of Earth, someone was coordinating far more than random resistance. On the 12th day of the invasion, the Empire lost an entire armored division to a farming town with no standing military presence. Commander Varesh replayed the combat footage 3 separate times in complete silence, hoping repetition would force the battle to make sense. It never did. The human settlement sat in the middle of endless flat farmland beneath gray skies and cold rain. According to orbital scans, the town possessed no strategic infrastructure, no hidden weapons caches, and no military fortifications. Imperial doctrine classified it as irrelevant. So the armored convoy passed directly through it. At first, nothing happened. Human civilians remained visible through windows. Elderly figures walked calmly through muddy streets. Agricultural machinery sat abandoned near fields flooded by heavy rain. The convoy advanced exactly as predicted until the lead transport crossed the center bridge. Then the entire road collapsed. Not from explosives. From structural failure. Floodgates hidden upriver had been opened hours earlier, weakening the supports slowly enough to avoid detection. The first transport plunged sideways into violent water while heavy mud trapped the vehicles behind it before they could maneuver. That alone would not have destroyed an Imperial division. The humans understood this. What followed disturbed Varesh far more. The attack did not come from soldiers. It came from everyone. Farmers emerged from flooded fields carrying old anti-vehicle weapons preserved from conflicts decades earlier. Teenagers on dirt bikes cut communication wires before drones could deploy properly. Elderly civilians used hunting rifles from rooftops to target exposed sensor arrays. Utility workers remotely overloaded nearby transformers, drowning the battlefield in darkness and electrical chaos. The Empire's combat system struggled immediately because nothing about the attack followed recognizable doctrine. There was no command structure, no central formation, no predictable tactical logic. Only relentless pressure from humans who seemed to know every inch of the terrain instinctively. Within 43 minutes, the entire division was gone. Varesh ended the replay. Around him, the tactical chamber remained unnaturally quiet. One strategist finally spoke carefully. "Commander, these are civilians." "No," Varesh replied. "These are humans."
I love this part. Even the aliens can't tell who is the army and who is not.
The distinction mattered now, because the Empire's models separated civilizations into categories. Soldiers fought. Civilians survived. Governments coordinated resistance. Once leadership collapsed, occupation stabilized naturally. Earth ignored every category. The longer the war continued, the more impossible humanity became to classify. Reports flooded in constantly now from across the planet. In the frozen north, alien patrols vanished during whiteout storms while human resistance fighters moved through the blizzards as though they belonged to them. In coastal regions, fishing fleets disguised supply movements beneath ordinary civilian traffic patterns too dense to isolate completely. In massive urban zones, subway systems became underground nations invisible to orbital surveillance. Every environment on Earth seemed to generate a different version of human resistance. And somehow they all understood exactly how to hurt the invaders. Inside the occupation zones, alien morale had begun collapsing faster than command was willing to admit publicly. Soldiers stopped sleeping properly. Entire units refused isolated deployment. Rumors spread through the ranks describing humans appearing silently inside secured zones before disappearing again into terrain, weather, or civilian crowds. One terrified field report claimed resistance fighters emerged from beneath snow itself. Another insisted human civilians intentionally left food and medical supplies in abandoned buildings to lure exhausted soldiers into traps. Varesh dismissed most rumors immediately. Then he received footage proving several of them true. That was the moment concern transformed into something darker. Because humanity was adapting faster than the Empire could learn. Inside a captured command post near the ruins of an industrial city, human resistance leader Captain Mira Vale studied a stolen tactical display while distant artillery shook dust from the ceiling above her. The room around her looked exhausted. Volunteer medics worked beside wounded civilians under flickering emergency lights. Engineers modified captured alien equipment with improvised tools scattered across tables. Children slept wrapped in military blankets against concrete walls while armed civilians guarded tunnel entrances nearby. None of it looked organized enough to survive. Yet somehow it had survived 12 days against the most powerful empire in known space. A young resistance fighter approached Mira holding intercepted invasion reports. "They're shifting forces east again," he said quietly. "Looks like they're finally learning." Mira glanced at the projection before shaking her head. "No," she replied. "They're still trying to fight one war." The young man frowned slightly. "What does that mean?" Mira looked toward the ceiling where distant explosions echoed above the city. "It means they think this ends when they beat an army." Her expression hardened. "They still don't understand Earth." The truth was simpler and far more dangerous than the Empire realized. Humanity was not resisting because of governments anymore, or borders, or ideology. The invasion had awakened something older than politics. That single idea connected every battlefield now. Farmers fought because invaders crossed their fields. Teachers fought because children hid underground. Mechanics fought because cities burned. Humanity's resistance did not require central coordination because Earth itself provided the motivation. And the Empire still had no answer for that. Far above the planet, Varesh stood inside the observation chamber once more, watching storms move slowly across Earth's atmosphere. He no longer saw weakness when he looked at the planet. He saw layers. Mountains protecting hidden valleys. Oceans concealing movement. Cities turning hostile block by block. Billions of humans reacting independently while somehow creating unified resistance through instinct alone. Earth was not behaving like conquered territory. It was behaving like a living organism attacking an infection. A warning suddenly interrupted the silence across the bridge. 3 orbital supply stations had gone dark simultaneously above the Pacific region. Varesh turned sharply toward the tactical displays. "No impact signatures detected," an officer reported nervously. "No incoming weapons." Stations simply stopped responding. Another alert followed immediately after. Then another. Across low orbit, critical supply nodes began disappearing one by one without visible attack. The Empire had spent days fearing Earth's surface. Now something in orbit had started hunting back.
Hey, the aliens just took the fight into space. This is about to get wild.
The first orbital station fell into the Pacific without warning. Millions of people across the western coastline watched the sky tear open as burning metal descended through the clouds like a dying moon. The station broke apart before impact, scattering massive sections of alien debris across the ocean while shockwaves rolled toward coastal cities beneath black smoke trails stretching across the horizon. For several seconds, the entire world stopped watching the invasion and simply stared upward. Then the Empire retaliated. Commander Varesh did not issue the order personally, but he understood why it happened. Fear had started spreading through the fleet faster than command could contain it. Entire supply grids were failing unpredictably. Orbital stations vanished without visible assault. Human resistance kept multiplying instead of collapsing. Every military projection that once promised fast conquest now displayed escalating instability. The Empire needed control back. So they targeted the thing humanity valued most: connection. Within hours, orbital bombardments struck communication towers, transportation hubs, hospitals, energy relays, and evacuation routes across multiple continents simultaneously. The attacks were precise, ruthless, and psychologically devastating. Entire cities lost power in seconds. Refugee convoys vanished beneath collapsing highways. Medical centers overloaded with casualties while emergency broadcasts dissolved into static and fire. For the first time since the invasion began, Earth looked wounded. Not angry. Not defiant. Wounded. Captain Mira Vale emerged from a shattered subway entrance into what remained of central Chicago just as ash began falling like snow through the streets. The skyline still burned from the orbital strikes hours earlier. Several skyscrapers leaned sideways against each other like dying giants while distant sirens echoed through smoke thick enough to hide the sky entirely. People still moved through the ruins. That shocked her most. Civilians carried supplies through collapsed intersections. Volunteer medics treated strangers beneath broken streetlights powered by portable generators. Construction workers cleared rubble with bare hands while armed resistance groups guarded intersections against incoming patrols. Nobody waited for permission. Nobody asked whether the government still existed. The city had simply decided to survive. A low vibration rolled through the air suddenly. Alien dropships. Mira looked upward through drifting smoke just as dark silhouettes emerged between the ruined buildings overhead. Massive troop carriers descended slowly toward the financial district while smaller gunships swept across the skyline searching for movement. "They're early," one resistance fighter muttered beside her. Mira checked the stolen tactical display strapped to her arm. The timing was wrong. Human scouts predicted the Empire would avoid dense urban zones after suffering heavy losses in close-quarter fighting during the first invasion week. Which meant something had changed. Then she saw it. The gunships were not scanning for resistance positions. They were targeting escape routes. Mira felt cold realization settle into her stomach. The Empire was no longer trying to control the population. It was trying to trap it. "Move everyone underground," she ordered immediately. "Now." The resistance teams scattered instantly through the ruined streets, shouting warnings toward civilians while the first alien transports landed several blocks away with enough force to shake nearby buildings. Then the execution started. Not mass slaughter. Worse. Calculated examples. The Empire began publicly destroying resistance shelters one by one after broadcasting surrender demands across local emergency channels. Entire neighborhoods watched buildings collapse live while alien commanders promised the destruction would continue until human attacks stopped. The strategy should have worked. It always worked before. Instead, Earth became furious. Across the planet, resistance activity doubled within 2 days. Alien patrols vanished in occupied territories faster than replacement forces could arrive. Human sabotage spread into newly secured zones almost immediately after Imperial occupation. Captured supply depots exploded from hidden failures hours after being declared safe. The more pain the Empire inflicted, the more resistance Earth generated. Commander Varesh stood motionless inside the fleet strategy chamber while updated casualty projections scrolled endlessly across the tactical displays. "This is irrational," one officer snapped in frustration. "Civilian fear should be reducing resistance efficiency." "It is increasing it," another answered grimly. Varesh already knew, because he had started studying human history personally. At first, it was simple curiosity. He wanted to understand why Earth resisted differently than conquered worlds. But the deeper he explored human records, the more disturbed he became. Humanity was not adapted for peace. It was adapted for recovery. Again and again throughout their history, humans survived catastrophes that should have destroyed them permanently. World wars, famines, plagues, collapsing nations, environmental disasters, civil conflicts lasting generations. And every time civilization broke apart, humans rebuilt faster than logic predicted. Not because they avoided suffering, because suffering was familiar. Varesh slowly realized the Empire had committed a catastrophic mistake during first contact assessments. They measured human technology. They should have measured endurance. A warning interrupted his thoughts. Another orbital supply station had vanished. Then another. This time, however, security footage survived. The chamber darkened as the recording expanded across the central display. At first, the station appeared normal. Imperial crews moved through corridors while cargo transports docked along the outer structure above Earth's atmosphere. Then the lights failed. For exactly 3 seconds. When backup systems activated, dozens of armored human figures already stood inside the station. Silence filled the chamber. The humans wore no matching uniforms. Some carried improvised equipment. Others used stolen Imperial weapons. One figure still wore damaged firefighter gear beneath scavenged combat armor. Yet they moved through the station with terrifying coordination. Precise. Purposeful. The footage became chaos moments later as internal defenses collapsed almost instantly. Human boarding teams disabled life support sections, sealed corridors, and eliminated command personnel before emergency lockdowns finished activating. Then the station went dark permanently. Varesh stared at the frozen image after the recording ended. Humans had reached orbit. Not through superior fleet strength. Through infiltration, improvisation, persistence. Earth was evolving faster than the invasion itself. Another transmission request suddenly appeared across the chamber. Unknown origin. Varesh authorized it immediately. Static filled the screen for several seconds before stabilizing into the face of an older human man sitting somewhere in darkness. Not military. Not frightened. The man studied Varesh silently before speaking. "You still think this war is about territory," he said softly. Varesh narrowed his eyes. "Who are you?" The man ignored the question. "This planet survived itself long before you arrived," he continued. "You invaded a species that learned thousands of years ago how to fight while bleeding." The transmission glitched violently. Then the man smiled faintly. "And Commander," his eyes hardened slightly, "you still haven't found the real defense network."
Man, Earth had a hidden plan the whole time, and the aliens still miss it.
The signal vanished. Across the tactical display behind Varesh, 7 more orbital stations suddenly disappeared at the same time. The Empire finally captured a human military archive on the 19th day of the invasion. Commander Varesh expected strategic data, defense maps, fleet positions, weapons research. Instead, the archive contained history. Thousands of years of it. At first, Imperial analysts assumed the files were corrupted. Entire databases focused on ancient wars fought long before humanity reached space. Primitive conflicts using outdated weapons. Revolutions. Civil wars. Resistance movements. Economic collapses. Guerrilla campaigns. Urban rebellions. Occupation failures. The Empire had no interest in ancient violence. Then the analysts realized something horrifying. Humans did. Varesh stood alone inside a dark intelligence chamber aboard the Judgment of Silence while giant holographic records floated around him like ghosts from another age. Human battle footage played silently across the walls. Grainy images of ruined cities. Starving civilians rebuilding nations from rubble. Soldiers crossing frozen landscapes despite impossible odds. Populations resisting occupations for years, sometimes decades, after conventional defeat. The deeper he studied, the less Earth's resistance looked chaotic. It looked inherited. Humanity carried memory differently than any species the Empire had encountered before. Most civilizations moved away from historical trauma as quickly as possible. Painful eras became buried, softened, forgotten over generations. Humans preserved theirs. Documented them. Studied them. Retold them. An Imperial historian entered carefully behind Varesh holding additional translated files. "Commander, I think we misunderstood their entire species." Varesh did not turn around. "Explain." The historian hesitated before answering. "Humans do not treat survival as temporary." He swallowed slowly. "They build cultures around it." That sentence stayed in the room like poison. Because suddenly everything made sense. The decentralized resistance. The rapid adaptation. The willingness to keep fighting after catastrophic losses. Humanity was not improvising under invasion pressure. Humanity was activating old instincts. Varesh enlarged another recovered archive file. It displayed dozens of human conflicts stretching across centuries, each marked with similar strategic patterns. Infrastructure denial. Civilian resistance. Asymmetric warfare. Psychological exhaustion tactics. Resource sabotage. Long memory retaliation. The Empire had believed Earth lacked unity because human history appeared divided by nations, languages, and ideology. Now Varesh understood the truth. Conflict itself had taught humanity how to cooperate under pressure. A quiet alert interrupted the archive review. Another orbital defense grid had vanished. This time the human attackers left something behind. A message. Varesh opened the transmission immediately. The recording showed a destroyed Imperial station drifting above Earth while damaged emergency lights flickered across smoke-filled corridors. Human resistance fighters moved through the background collecting supplies and evacuating wounded civilians, both human and alien alike. Then Captain Mira Vale stepped into frame. Varesh recognized her instantly from resistance reports. Her face looked exhausted beneath dirt and bruises, but her eyes remained terrifyingly focused. "You want to know why this invasion is failing?" she asked calmly. The camera shifted briefly toward the planet below. Earth rotated silently beneath them, beautiful and scarred at the same time. "You thought humans needed stability to survive." Mira looked back toward the camera. "That was your mistake." The transmission ended abruptly. Varesh replayed the final sentence twice. Then 3 times. Something about it unsettled him deeply because it contradicted the Empire's entire understanding of civilization itself. Every species sought stability, order, predictability. But humans appeared to grow more dangerous the more unstable conditions became. Another recovered archive suddenly caught Varesh's attention. A historical lecture given decades before first contact. The speaker was a human cultural analyst named Dr. Elias Noor. Varesh activated the file. An older human man appeared standing before a classroom filled with students. "If humanity ever encounters an expansionist interstellar empire," Noor explained calmly, "that empire will make one fatal assumption. They will think human conflict proves weakness." He paused briefly. "In reality, human conflict trained adaptation into our species at every level." The students listened silently while historical battle footage played behind him. "Our greatest advantage is not technology," Noor continued. "It is emotional continuity. Humans remember pressure. We pass survival behaviors between generations even during peace." Varesh felt his breathing slow. Because the lecture had been recorded years before the invasion. Humanity predicted them. Not specifically, but conceptually. Earth expected something like the Empire eventually, and prepared psychologically for it long before first contact. The realization became even worse moments later. A hidden section of the archive finally decrypted completely. Imperial analysts stared in disbelief as a classified strategic file expanded across the chamber. The title alone froze the room. Long Memory Defense Theory. Varesh opened it immediately. The document described a terrifying military concept developed quietly by human strategists after observing galactic politics during early diplomatic contact. The theory was simple. Most empires depended on short-term victories and centralized pressure. Humanity would respond differently. If invaded, Earth would avoid decisive collapse by transforming the entire planet into a generational resistance structure. Civilians, infrastructure, culture, education, logistics, local identity, and historical memory would all become part of the defense system itself. The goal was not merely to survive invasion. The goal was to make occupations psychologically impossible. Varesh stared at the final section of the theory document. It contained only one sentence. "A species that remembers suffering cannot be conquered quickly."
That may be the hardest line in this whole story. Humans never forget pain.
Silence swallowed the chamber. For the first time since the war began, Varesh understood the scale of the Empire's error. This was never going to end through superior firepower. Earth had spent thousands of years unconsciously preparing for exactly this kind of war. And somewhere beneath the burning cities and fractured skies of humanity's world, Dr. Elias Noor himself was still alive. Worse, he was broadcasting something toward occupied alien systems beyond Earth. The first occupied alien colony rebelled 23 days after Elias Noor's broadcasts began. Not because humans reached the planet, because the truth did. Commander Varesh watched the emergency transmission unfold across the tactical chamber in stunned silence while flames spread through the capital district of Kareth Prime behind the terrified governor struggling to maintain control. Crowds filled the streets beneath shattered imperial banners while local security forces abandoned checkpoints one after another. Entire labor sectors stopped operating simultaneously. Military supply convoys vanished before reaching orbitals. And everywhere, the same symbol appeared repeatedly across walls, broadcasts, and stolen communication feeds. A single human phrase translated into dozens of alien languages. "You can resist." The Empire immediately blamed human cyber warfare. Then intelligence confirmed something worse. The rebellion was local. The humans had not infiltrated the colony militarily. They had infected it psychologically. Varesh enlarged intercepted transmissions flooding between occupied worlds now. Alien civilians questioned why the Empire hid casualty reports from Earth. Soldiers demanded explanations for the growing orbital losses. Entire populations began comparing their own histories to the human resistance archives nor broadcast secretly through compromised communication channels. Humanity had turned memory into a weapon. The Empire conquered civilizations by isolating them emotionally from each other. Fear remained manageable when populations believed resistance was hopeless everywhere else. But now conquered species were watching Earth survive. Watching civilians fight. Watching the Empire bleed. And the illusion of invincibility was collapsing faster than military command could contain. Inside a hidden resistance command center beneath the ruins of Istanbul, Dr. Elias Noor studied intercepted alien broadcasts while generators hummed softly through the underground chamber around him. Unlike Miravel, Noor did not look like a soldier. Thin-framed glasses rested crookedly across his tired face while old historical notes covered the tables surrounding him. Yet somewhere beyond Earth, entire worlds had started listening to him more closely than they listened to emperors. A young resistance courier entered quickly carrying fresh reports. Kareth Prime officially declared martial law, she said breathlessly. 3 more colonies showing civil unrest. Noor nodded slowly. It's spreading faster now. The courier hesitated before asking the question everyone eventually asked him. Did you really predict this before first contact? Noor leaned back quietly. Not this invasion specifically, he admitted. But every empire eventually believes resistance is irrational. He looked toward the damaged ceiling above them where distant bombardments echoed faintly through the city. Humans know something empires forget. His expression darkened slightly. People will endure suffering longer than they endure humiliation. Far above Earth, the Empire's situation continued deteriorating. Human resistance attacks grew more sophisticated every day. Captured alien systems were now being turned against the occupation itself. Engineers learned how to disrupt Imperial drone coordination. Hackers manipulated logistical routing systems. Resistance infiltrators used stolen armor and forged identity signals to move between occupied zones almost freely. Worst of all, humans had stopped reacting emotionally to the invasion. They adapted to it. That terrified Varesh more than anything. The Empire depended on shock. Psychological dominance. Overwhelming displays of superiority. Fear was supposed to exhaust civilizations into submission before long-term resistance became sustainable. But Earth treated catastrophe differently. Every destroyed city created hardened survivors. Every orbital strike produced more volunteers. Every occupation zone became a training ground. The invasion was no longer weakening humanity. It was teaching humanity how to fight the Empire better. A tactical officer approached Varesh carefully. Commander, there is another issue. There are many issues. The officer swallowed. Several occupied colonies are refusing Imperial directives unless Earth bombardments stop. Varesh turned slowly. What? Supply sectors are threatening labor shutdowns. Civilian populations are circulating human resistance footage. The officer hesitated visibly. Some military detachments stationed off-world are beginning to question the war. Silence settled heavily across the chamber. That should have been impossible. The Empire's military structure relied on psychological certainty as much as force itself. Soldiers obeyed because Imperial expansion represented order, stability, inevitability. Humans were attacking inevitability directly. Another transmission suddenly forced itself onto the central tactical display. Captain Mira Vale appeared immediately. This time she stood inside a captured orbital station overlooking Earth beneath massive observation windows. Human resistance fighters moved through the background while alien prisoners received medical treatment nearby. Varesh noticed that detail instantly. The prisoners were alive. Protected. Mira saw him noticing. You still don't understand us, she said quietly. Varesh narrowed his eyes. You are spreading rebellion through Imperial territory. No, Mira corrected calmly. Your empire built that rebellion itself. She gestured toward Earth below. We're just showing people they don't have to stay afraid forever. Varesh studied her carefully. You think this ends with political collapse? Mira looked exhausted for the first time since he had seen her. No, she answered honestly. I think this ends when enough people realize fear is the only thing holding your empire together. The transmission shifted suddenly. New footage appeared beside her. Occupied worlds. Protests. Factory shutdowns. Alien civilians broadcasting resistance messages inspired directly by Earth's survival. Varesh felt something dangerous tightening inside his chest. Because for the first time since arriving at Earth, he saw a path where the Empire could genuinely lose. Not militarily. Structurally. Humanity was turning conquest itself into a contagious weakness. And somewhere inside the highest levels of Imperial command, leaders had finally reached the same conclusion. A priority transmission arrived moments later from the Imperial core worlds. Varesh opened it immediately. The face appearing on the screen belonged to High Executor Tarek, one of the most feared military authorities in the Empire. He wasted no time. Commander Varesh, he said coldly, Earth will be neutralized permanently within 72 hours.
Okay, now this just got scary. The Empire is not trying to win anymore.
The chamber froze. Varesh stared at him carefully. Define neutralized. Tarek's expression never changed. The species has demonstrated unacceptable mimetic contamination risk. Authorization has been granted for planetary sterilization. For the first time in the entire war, genuine silence consumed the tactical chamber. Then Tarek delivered the sentence that changed everything. And Commander, your fleet will remain in orbit until the operation is complete. Outside the observation windows, Earth continued turning slowly beneath the stars, unaware that the Empire had finally decided to kill the entire planet. The sterilization fleet arrived over Earth in complete silence. No warnings. No surrender demands. No speeches about imperial order or civilized compliance. The Empire had moved beyond conquest now. This was extermination. Commander Varesh stood motionless inside the observation chamber as enormous black warships emerged from fold space one after another across Earth's orbit, their silhouettes so massive they swallowed sections of the stars behind them. Planetary eradication platforms drifted slowly into formation while crimson targeting grids spread across the continents below like glowing fractures across the surface of the world. For the first time since the invasion began, Earth looked small again. Not weak. Just heartbreakingly mortal. The new fleet dwarfed everything already in orbit. These were not occupation vessels designed for prolonged campaigns. These were extinction ships built for one purpose only: reducing civilizations into radioactive memory. Varesh felt cold realization settle through him. The Empire was afraid. Not of Earth's weapons. Not of humanity's armies. Of humanity's example. That fear had finally become greater than the cost of genocide. Across the planet, emergency broadcasts exploded through every remaining communication channel as humans watched the sky fill with enough firepower to erase oceans. Cities already damaged by bombardment fell into tense silence instead of panic. Roads flooded with civilians moving underground while resistance groups abandoned local offensives almost instantly. The atmosphere changed everywhere at once. Humanity finally understood this was the endgame. Inside the underground command center beneath Istanbul, Dr. Elias Noor listened quietly while reports poured through the chamber around him. Orbital strike platforms locking onto major population zones. Deep shelter networks reaching maximum capacity. Pacific resistance sectors requesting evacuation support. Noor closed his eyes briefly. The room looked exhausted beyond words now. Generators flickered constantly from unstable power grids. Medical stations overflowed with wounded civilians. Resistance coordinators barely slept anymore. Yet despite everything, nobody inside the chamber talked about surrender. That terrified him. Because part of humanity would rather die fighting than survive kneeling. And the Empire had finally pushed the species to that edge. Captain Mira Vale entered the chamber carrying stolen Imperial files, dirt and dried blood still covering her armor from orbital station raids hours earlier. "They're moving faster than expected," she said immediately. "Core fleets already sealing the moon approaches." Nor nodded once. "We're out of time." Mira studied him carefully. "You found something." It was not a question. Nor looked toward the giant tactical display showing Earth surrounded completely now. Then he activated the stolen files. The chamber went silent instantly. Imperial records flooded across the screens. Decades of occupation reports. Resource extraction statistics. Forced relocations. Civilian suppression campaigns. Entire species systematically crushed beneath imperial expansion policies while official propaganda described it all as stabilization. The resistance members stared in disbelief. Some looked furious. Others horrified. Mira slowly understood first. "This is everything," she whispered. Nor nodded quietly. "Not just military records. Administrative archives. Economic systems. Population management protocols." His expression darkened. Proof. Proof the Empire survived through fear and isolation. Proof countless conquered civilizations never saw each other's suffering because the Empire controlled every narrative between worlds. And now Earth possessed all of it. A young resistance fighter looked up from the data streams. "If this reaches occupied systems?" "The Empire fractures," Mira finished. Nor remained silent. Because another possibility terrified him more. "What?" Mira asked carefully. He looked toward the tactical display again. "If we transmit this now," he said quietly, "the Empire sterilizes Earth before the message fully spreads." The chamber fell still. There was the impossible choice. Humanity could hurt the Empire permanently now. Maybe even destroy it. The occupied colonies were already unstable. Resistance movements spread daily. If the truth reached enough worlds simultaneously, rebellion would ignite across imperial territory faster than military command could suppress it. But Earth might not survive long enough to see it happen. Mira stared at the tactical display showing extinction fleets tightening around the planet. How long before they fire? Less than 6 hours. Silence settled heavily over the room while distant bombardments echoed faintly above the city. For weeks humanity fought to survive. Now survival itself might require sacrificing the chance to free everyone else. A sharp alert suddenly interrupted the chamber. Unauthorized transmission incoming. Imperial command priority. Nor exchanged a glance with Mira before opening it. High Executor Tarek appeared immediately across the central screen, his expression colder than stone. "You have 1 hour," he said without introduction. "Deactivate all resistance operations and surrender Earth's leadership structure." Mira laughed bitterly. "Leadership structure? You still think we work like that?" Tarek ignored her completely. Failure to comply results in immediate sterilization. Nor stepped forward calmly. "You're not trying to save the Empire anymore," he observed quietly. "You're trying to stop the idea." For the first time, Tarek hesitated slightly. That hesitation confirmed everything. Humanity had become dangerous because resistance itself was spreading through imperial space like a virus. Conquered species no longer saw the Empire as inevitable. They saw Earth surviving against impossible odds. And hope was harder to kill than armies. Tarek's eyes hardened again. "Transmit your surrender within 1 hour." The signal vanished. The chamber remained silent afterward. Then Mira looked toward Nor. "What if we do both?" He frowned slightly. "Explain." "We already know the Empire controls communication choke points." She pointed toward the tactical projections surrounding Earth. "So stop trying to send one message." Understanding spread slowly across Nor's face. Then something close to awe. Because the idea was insane. Purely human. And it might actually work. Above Earth, the sterilization fleet continued charging planet killer weapons while billions waited beneath the shadow of extinction. Unaware that humanity's final counterattack was no longer aimed at the war. It was aimed at the Empire's reality itself. The Empire fired first. At exactly 4:17 Universal Fleet Time, the sterilization platforms above Earth began charging. Across the planet, the night sky changed color. Massive rings of crimson energy spread beneath the clouds while oceans reflected the growing light like blood across the horizon. Entire cities fell silent as billions of humans looked upward together, fully aware that extinction was no longer a possibility waiting in the future. It had arrived. Commander Varesh stood frozen inside the observation chamber aboard the Judgment of Silence while targeting projections locked onto Earth below. He should have felt certainty, finality, relief that the Empire would survive this contamination spreading through occupied systems. Instead, all he felt was dread, because humanity still had not surrendered. Even now, even facing annihilation, that terrified him more than any battlefield ever had. Then every communication channel in the fleet activated simultaneously. Not hacked. Overwhelmed. Thousands of human transmissions erupted across Imperial frequencies at once, flooding military systems faster than suppression protocols could isolate them. The bridge exploded into confusion as tactical officers tried desperately to contain the signal storm spreading through every connected network. Varesh stared at the screens in disbelief. It was not one broadcast. It was millions. Human civilians. Resistance cells. Captured colonies. Hidden transmitters buried across occupied worlds. Every message carried fragments of the stolen Imperial archives. Every message exposed another crime. Another occupation. Another erased civilization. Humanity had not sent the truth from one source. Humanity had turned itself into the source.
This is insane. Humans did not fight with ships. They fought with truth.
This is impossible, an officer whispered. Varesh realized suddenly. It was inevitable. Because humans never centralized resistance the way the Empire expected. Earth fought like memory itself, scattered, emotional, impossible to erase completely. And now the truth spread the same way. Across the galaxy, Imperial communication systems collapsed beneath the weight of uncontrolled information. Occupied colonies watched evidence of massacres hidden for generations. Military personnel discovered entire wars erased from official history. Civilian populations learned they were not isolated victims but part of a vast machine built from fear and silence. Riots ignited within minutes. Then mutinies. Then open rebellion. Entire occupation fleets stopped responding to Imperial command while soldiers argued violently aboard their own ships. Colonial governors disappeared from public view as local security forces abandoned them. Emergency broadcasts flooded every major system simultaneously as species long divided from each other finally saw the full scale of the Empire's brutality. Humanity had not attacked the Empire's military. It attacked the Empire's narrative. And narratives were harder to defend than planets. High Executor Tarek appeared across fleet command channels moments later, fury visible even through the distortion-consuming communication systems. "Fire immediately," he shouted. "End this now." But several ships failed to respond. Then dozens. Then hundreds. Because crews across the sterilization fleet were already watching the human transmissions too. Watching conquered worlds rise. Watching civilians celebrate Earth's resistance. Watching the Empire's own secrets tear through the galaxy faster than command could suppress them. Fear was breaking apart. And without fear, the Empire suddenly looked very mortal. Inside the underground command center beneath Istanbul, Mira Vale stood beside Dr. Elias Noor while the final phase of humanity's broadcast spread outward beyond Earth. The chamber around them trembled constantly now from orbital weapon charging overhead. Dust fell from the ceiling. Emergency lights flickered. Somewhere above the city, extinction hovered only minutes away. Yet for the first time since the invasion began, people inside the command center smiled. Not because Earth was safe. Because the Empire was finally bleeding truth. A resistance operator looked up from the transmission consoles, stunned. "It's working," she whispered. Nor stared silently at the incoming reports. Occupied systems refusing Imperial orders. Military sectors declaring neutrality. Entire conquered populations rising simultaneously after decades of fear. Humanity had done something no species ever accomplished before. It taught the galaxy how to say no. Then another alert appeared. Orbital weapon systems disengaging. The room froze. Mira stepped closer to the tactical display in disbelief as crimson targeting grids above Earth began vanishing one by one. Massive sterilization ships drifted unevenly out of formation while internal conflicts erupted across fleet communications. Some commanders still demanded extermination. Others refused. Several fleets were already turning their weapons against each other. The Empire had finally shattered under the one force it never understood. Shared memory. Commander Varesh watched the chaos unfold around him while alarms echoed through the judgment of silence. Officers shouted conflicting orders. Communication systems failed continuously. Reports from Imperial core worlds grew worse by the minute. Rebellions everywhere. Supply routes collapsing. Entire military sectors refusing obedience. The Empire was dying exactly the way it once conquered others. Through loss of fear. Varesh slowly looked back toward Earth through the observation glass. The planet still turned beneath the stars despite everything thrown against it. Burned, wounded, defiant. He finally understood why humanity could not be conquered. Not because humans were physically stronger. Not because they possessed superior technology. But because suffering never convinced them resistance was meaningless. If anything, suffering convinced them resistance mattered more. A quiet transmission suddenly appeared on his private channel. Dr. Elias Noor. Varesh accepted it silently. For several seconds neither spoke. Then Noor asked softly, "Do you understand now?" Varesh looked toward the collapsing fleet around him. "Yes," he admitted. Noor nodded once. "You thought fear created stability." His expression hardened slightly. Humans learned long ago that fear only creates silence. The transmission ended. Hours later, the sterilization fleet withdrew from Earth. Not as conquerors retreating strategically. As an empire losing control of itself. Across the planet, humans emerged slowly from underground shelters into ruined cities lit by sunrise breaking through smoke-filled skies. Survivors stood together in shattered streets watching alien warships disappear beyond the atmosphere while emergency broadcasts spread unbelievable news from system after system. The occupied worlds were rising. And at the center of it all stood one battered, furious, impossible planet the Empire thought would surrender in days. Earth survived. Not by overpowering the galaxy, but by reminding it that no civilization built on fear lasts forever.
Earth did not win because it was bigger or stronger. Earth won because humans never stopped getting back up.